At 2 a.m., my sister stealthily took my credit card while I was asleep. By morning, $15,000 had vanished, spent on a first-class trip to Japan and lavish gifts for our cousin. A week later, when she returned, Dad declared, "Stop pretending, she'd never touch your money." I simply smiled. The card she used. My name is Hazel Williams, and at 32 I believed I had truly arrived. After years of relentless effort, I had built a thriving career as a financial analyst and owned a beautiful downtown apartment I was immensely proud of. My younger sister Brooke, perpetually our parents' favorite despite her history of reckless behavior, was keenly aware of how comfortable my life had become. What I never anticipated was that she would wait until I was deeply asleep to rob me. Before recounting the nightmare that unfolded, let me set the scene. I grew up in a modest Boston neighborhood. Our parents, Eleanor and Thomas Williams, worked tirelessly to provide for us, their two daughters. From an early age, it was obvious that different rules applied to Brooke and me. Brooke, 3 years my junior, could effortlessly charm her way out of any predicament with her sparkling blue eyes and infectious giggle. When, at 7, she shattered a neighbor's window with a baseball, my parents dismissed it as an accident and praised her athletic prowess. When she failed 5th grade math, they blamed the teacher for failing to appreciate her creative mind. I, conversely, was expected to be the dependable one. My report cards had to be flawless, my room immaculate. Any misstep from me was met with disappointment, unlike the understanding Brooke consistently received. This inherent double standard shaped us profoundly. Brooke learned she could escape accountability for almost anything, while I cultivated intense self-reliance and financial responsibility traits that would define my adult life. By 16, I was working part-time at a local bookstore, meticulously saving every dollar for college. My parents made it clear they would assist with tuition, but I needed to contribute substantially. Brooke, meanwhile, drifted through high school, flitting between hobbies and social circles, never developing the discipline that would later be vital for adulthood. College proved a pivotal period for me. Attending Boston University on a partial scholarship, I concurrently worked 20 hours a week at a campus coffee shop, maintained a 3.9 GPA, and secured competitive internships every summer. Those years were exhausting yet fundamentally shaping. I mastered functioning on minimal sleep, budgeting with absolute precision, and never relying on others to solve my problems. Upon graduation, I confronted the harsh realities of the job market during an economic slump. Entry-level finance positions were scarce. For 9 months, I worked as an administrative assistant at an insurance company while submitting applications to countless financial firms. Rejection letters mounted, yet I persevered. Finally, my breakthrough arrived, a junior analyst role at Morton Financial. The salary was modest, but it was precisely the opportunity I needed. For 5 years, I steadily climbed the company ladder. 12-hour days were routine. I volunteered for undesirable projects, building a reputation for meticulousness and unwavering reliability. When a senior analyst position opened last year, I earned the promotion through sheer tenacity and consistent excellence. That promotion brought a significant salary increase, enabling me to finally purchase my dream apartment complete with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. After years of roommates and cramped living, owning a place that was truly mine felt like the ultimate triumph. My rigorous financial discipline had also resulted in substantial savings and an exceptional credit score, 820 plus. This score had unlocked premium credit cards and banking services most people my age could only dream of. My most valued financial asset was my Black Excelsior card, boasting a generous limit and exclusive benefits. I seldom utilized its full potential, preferring to maintain my frugal habits, but I deeply valued what it represented: financial security forged through years of impeccable credit management. While I was building my robust career and financial foundation, Brooke was charting a distinctly different course. After high school, over 4 years, she enrolled in 3 diverse college programs, yet completed none. Photography, marketing, and psychology briefly captivated her interest before boredom set in or the coursework became too demanding. Her professional history mirrored this pattern: retail positions, restaurant gigs, office administration. She'd start with enthusiasm, then succumb to calling in sick or chronic tardiness, leading to inevitable termination. Each job loss was, in her narrative, never her fault. According to Brooke, managers were unreasonable, hours unfair, or the work environment toxic. Blame was always externalized. Our parents consistently reinforced this narrative by rescuing her. They provided rent money when she fell short, a new car when hers was repossessed, and co-signed for apartments despite her history of evictions. They labeled it supporting her while she found her path. I, however, viewed it as enabling irresponsibility. 6 months before the pivotal incident, Brooke had been fired from her latest role at a marketing firm due to perpetual lateness. In the same week, her boyfriend, Jake, ended their 3-year relationship after discovering her deceit regarding their shared finances. Rather than accepting accountability, Brooke temporarily moved back home with our parents, sinking into a cycle of incessant online shopping and nights out with friends, with funds seemingly materializing despite her unemployment. Sunday dinners at my parents' house had grown increasingly fraught. While my mother would lavish praise on Brooke for trivial achievements, applying for a single job or making dinner once that week, my father would deftly redirect conversations away from anything that might underscore the widening gap between his daughters' lives. Whenever Brooke mentioned a new acquisition or an upcoming trip, I'd catch my father wince slightly, then swiftly change the subject. My attempts to establish personal boundaries were invariably perceived as coldness or a lack of familial loyalty. 3 weeks before the theft, I had declined to loan Brooke $2,000 for what she termed business clothes for interviews. This refusal ignited a heated argument at dinner. My mother implied I had grown selfish with my success, while my father quietly gazed at his plate. "You have more than enough money, Hazel," my mother had stated. "She's your sister. Family helps family." "I would help her in other ways," I countered. "Career guidance, resume review, interview preparation, but not cash that would vanish without a trace." Brooke had then stormed out, labeling me heartless. My parents gave me that familiar look, one I'd known my entire life. The look that asked, "Why can't you just comply? Why must you always complicate things?" I left dinner early that night, driving back to my apartment with a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. It was the same sensation I'd carried since childhood, the belief that loving my sister meant enabling her, and that refusing to do so cast me as the villain in our family narrative. What I didn't grasp then was that my refusal of that loan had inadvertently set in motion a scheme in my sister's mind, a plan to target the very symbol of my financial success, my premium black Excelsior card, with its $15,000 limit, kept separate from my everyday cards. The card I had earned through years of perfect credit management. The card that embodied everything Brooke had never worked for. The day preceding the theft proved exceptionally demanding. I was finalizing a critical presentation for a prospective client, a deal that could secure millions in new business for our firm. The pressure was immense, and my long-standing insomnia, a constant companion since college, was particularly severe. For the past week, I'd averaged only 4 hours of sleep, functioning solely on copious coffee and sheer willpower. At 7:30 that evening, just as I was giving my presentation its 5th review, my phone rang. It was Brooke, her voice uncharacteristically meek and fragile. "Hazel, I hate to impose, but I truly need a place to stay tonight," she said. "Tiffany and I had a huge argument, and I can't return to the apartment right now." Tiffany was Brooke's newest roommate, a girl she'd met through mutual friends merely 2 months prior. They had moved in together after barely knowing each other, a decision I had strongly advised against. "Can't you stay with Mom and Dad?" I inquired, my gaze fixed on my laptop screen where dozens of financial projections awaited my scrutiny. "They're at that couple's retreat in Vermont this weekend, remember?" Brooke replied. "Please, I promise I'll be gone first thing in the morning. I just need one night." I hesitated. I desperately needed a full night's rest before my 9 a.m. presentation. But the alternative was my sister potentially sleeping in her car or contacting friends who might not have her best interests at heart. "Fine," I finally conceded. I'll text you the address. Use the intercom when you arrive. I sent her my address, although I was certain she already knew it from the housewarming party I'd hosted 3 months earlier. Despite my reservations, I began tidying the guest bathroom and retrieving extra blankets from the closet for the sofa. My apartment had 2 bedrooms, but the second served as my home office, entirely unsuitable for overnight guests. Brooke arrived 45 minutes later, carrying a suspiciously large overnight bag for someone planning a single night's stay. Her eyes were slightly red, though I couldn't discern if she'd been crying or if, as she claimed, it was allergies. She embraced me tightly at the door, profusely thanking me for accommodating her. We ate a simple pasta dinner, which I'd quickly prepared, while she offered fragmented details about her dispute with Tiffany, something about shared groceries, and borrowed clothes that didn't quite align with the dramatic exit she described. Throughout the meal, I observed her glancing around my apartment, taking in the furnishings and decor with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "So when do you have to leave for work tomorrow?" she casually inquired as I rinsed our plates. "I have a presentation at 9 o'clock, I replied. "I'll probably head out around 7:30 to prepare at the office." "You seem stressed," she remarked. "Are you sleeping okay?" The question surprised me. Brooke rarely showed concern for my well-being. "Not great," I admitted. "I've had terrible insomnia this week with this project deadline." "Do you take anything for it?" she pressed. "Sometimes," I said, refraining from elaborating on the prescription sleep aid my doctor had recently prescribed for occasional use. As I prepared the couch with sheets and blankets, Brooke continued asking peculiar questions. How secure was the building? Did I know my neighbors well? Was my bedroom door difficult to open if it swelled from humidity? Each question seemed innocuous on its own, but collectively they formed a pattern I was too exhausted to recognize. Before retreating to my bedroom, I showed her where everything was: the bathroom, glasses for water, the television remote. I placed my purse and wallet on my nightstand, as I always did, not giving this habit a second thought despite having a guest. My special black Excelsior card was tucked into my wallet's inner pocket, separate from my everyday cards. I swallowed my prescription sleep medication with a glass of water, set my alarm for 6 a.m. and collapsed into bed, the combined effect of a week's sleep deprivation and the medication quickly took hold, pulling me into a deeper slumber than usual. Normally, I was a light sleeper, waking at the slightest sound. That night, however, I was utterly unconscious, vulnerable in a way I rarely permitted myself to be. At precisely 2 a.m., according to the timestamps that would later become crucial evidence, Brooke stealthily moved down the hallway toward my bedroom. She paused outside my door, listening intently for any indication I might be awake. Hearing only my deep, medication-induced breathing, she slowly turned the doorknob, pushing the door open just enough to confirm I lay motionless in bed. With deliberate, calculated movements, she approached my nightstand. She stood observing me for almost a full minute, ensuring beyond a doubt that I was in a profound sleep. Then, with meticulous precision, she lifted my wallet from my purse. She carried it into the bathroom, closing the door before switching on the light to minimize any risk of waking me. Inside my wallet, she located her target, my black Excelsior card. She temporarily removed it, using her phone to photograph both sides, capturing every necessary detail: the 16-digit number, expiration date, and security code. She even briefly extracted my driver's license to record my billing address specifics. With this information secured on her phone, she carefully returned the card exactly as she'd found it. But her task wasn't complete. She required one more item. Returning to my bedside with the wallet meticulously replaced, she carefully retrieved my phone from its charging spot on the nightstand. She knew that significant purchases would trigger security protocols, requiring verification via my phone. With practiced ease, she used my sleeping face to unlock the device via facial recognition, then swiftly disabled notifications that might alert me to any transactions. She forwarded the verification texts to her own number, then deleted the forwarding evidence, returning my phone to its charging position. As she completed this final step, I stirred slightly, shifting in my sleep. Brooke froze, her heart pounding, until I settled back into stillness. With a final glance to confirm everything appeared undisturbed, she slipped out of my room and returned to the living room. For the next hour, as I slept completely unaware, Brooke initiated her spending spree. Using her laptop and the photos of my card, she first booked 2 first-class tickets to Tokyo for herself and our cousin Olivia. Departing that very morning at 11 a.m., the airfare alone amounted to $6,000. Next came a 7-night reservation at the exclusive Park Hyatt Tokyo, totaling $3,500. She then indulged in online shopping at luxury Japanese brands, pre-ordering items for collection upon their arrival, adding another $5,500. By 3:30 a.m., Brooke had charged precisely $15,000 to my card, the entire available credit limit. She had timed everything flawlessly, making the purchases in the dead of night when I'd be least likely to see alerts, and planning a departure that would have her out of the country before I could fully react. As dawn broke, Brooke packed her overnight bag and quickly scribbled a note on a page from my kitchen notepad. Emergency at Tiffany's. Had to run. Thanks for letting me crash. Love you. XOB. She placed it prominently on the coffee table, where I'd easily discover it, then quietly let herself out of my apartment at 5:15 a.m. Full 45 minutes before my alarm was set to ring. She had already arranged for a rideshare to pick her up and take her directly to the airport, where Olivia would be waiting, luggage already packed for the adventure Brooke had promised her days earlier. My sister had executed what she believed to be the perfect crime. I jolted awake, not to my alarm, but to my phone's relentless buzzing at 6:02 a.m. Through blurred vision, I saw my screen deluged with text messages. The first one made my stomach plummet. Excelsior card alert. Purchase approved for $6,000 at International Airways. Subsequent messages were equally alarming. $3,500 at Park Hyatt Tokyo. $2,800 at Ginza Luxury Collections. $1,700 at Tokyo Electronics Direct. $1,000 at Sakura Designer Boutique. Finally, the ultimate notification. Excelsior card alert. You have reached 100% of your credit limit. $15,000 gone. In the dead of night, while I slept, my hands trembled. I sat bolt upright in bed, fully awake despite the lingering effects of my sleep medication. This had to be an error. I never made such purchases. I had never even been to Japan. I immediately dialed the Excelsior customer service line, my voice cracking as I reported the apparent fraud. The representative, calm and professional, asked me to confirm the suspicious transactions. No, I did not make any of these purchases, I insisted. I was asleep. My card is right here in my wallet. I fumbled for my purse, then my wallet. The black Excelsior card lay exactly where it should be, nestled in its designated compartment. How was this even possible? How could someone use my card when it was physically in my possession? As the representative placed me on hold to transfer me to the fraud department, Brooke suddenly came to mind. I called her name, but the apartment remained silent. I rushed to the living room, finding the couch empty, the blankets neatly folded, and her note prominently displayed, emergency at Tiffany's, had to run. Thanks for letting me crash. Love you, XOB. Something felt profoundly wrong. I called Brooke instantly, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent a text, please call me ASAP, important. Back on the phone with the fraud department, I received devastating news. The purchases had been verified through my own phone. The system had sent verification codes that were correctly entered. The billing address used matched my records precisely. Because all security protocols had been correctly followed, the representative explained, it would take time to investigate whether this qualified as fraud. But I was with my phone all night, I protested. It was charging next to my bed. I quickly checked my phone settings and noticed something peculiar. The notification settings for my banking apps had been altered. Text forwarding had been enabled, then disabled. A chilling realization began to creep over me. With mounting suspicion, I examined my wallet more closely. Nothing was missing, yet I could tell it had been handled. The cards were arranged slightly differently than my usual meticulous organization. My driver's license was in the wrong slot. As I frantically prepared for my presentation, now hopelessly behind schedule, I noticed other subtle signs of intrusion. My desk drawer was slightly ajar, the bathroom towel hung differently than I would have left it. Someone had gone through my belongings while I slept. I called Brooke repeatedly, each time reaching her voicemail. I tried Tiffany, her roommate, who sounded utterly confused when I mentioned their fight. Fight? What fight? She asked. Brooke told me she was staying with your parents this week because they needed help with a house project. The lie confirmed my burgeoning suspicion. With trembling fingers, I opened Instagram. The very first post in my feed sent a chill down my spine. It was Brooke, a selfie from what was clearly an airport terminal. The caption read, "Surprise trip with my favorite cousin. #Tokyo #first class." She had tagged Olivia, our 23-year-old cousin, who had always been Brooke's accomplice in impulsive escapades. The timestamp showed it had been posted just 30 minutes earlier. They were already at the airport, about to leave the country with my $15,000. In a state of panic, I called my parents. Despite the early hour, my mother answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Mom, I think Brooke stole my credit card information." I blurted without preamble. "She's charged $15,000 and is about to board a flight to Tokyo with Olivia." There was a pause before my mother responded, her voice instantly defensive. "Hazel, what are you talking about? Brooke would never do something like that." "Mom, I have proof," I insisted, my voice rising. "She stayed at my apartment last night, and now there are charges on my card for flights to Tokyo. She's literally posted on Instagram that she's at the airport with Olivia." "There must be some misunderstanding," my mother said firmly. "Maybe she used her own card and the bank made a mistake. You know how these financial institutions mix things up sometimes?" I could hear my father in the background asking what was happening. My mother partially covered the phone, but I could still hear her explaining my accusation in a tone that suggested I was being hysterical. When my father came on the line, his voice carried that familiar note of disappointment.
"Hazel, this
is a serious accusation," he said gravely. "Brooke has her issues, but she would never steal from family. Perhaps you should check your facts before throwing around allegations like this." "Dad, I am literally looking at $15,000 in charges to my card and an Instagram post of Brooke and Olivia at the airport, heading to Tokyo," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "What more facts do I need?" "Maybe you gave her permission and forgot," he suggested. "Or perhaps you mentioned your card details in front of her at some point. You've been working very hard lately. Perhaps you're not thinking clearly." I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach, the same knot I'd felt countless times throughout my childhood, whenever my perception of reality clashed with my family's unwillingness to hold Brooke accountable. For a brief, disorienting moment, I actually wondered if I could be wrong. Had I somehow authorized these charges in a sleep-deprived haze? Had I given Brooke permission that I simply couldn't recall? No, I shook the doubt away. The evidence was undeniable. The timing was precise. This was theft, plain and simple. I ended the call with my parents, promising an update when I knew more. But their dismissal had shaken me. As I rushed to prepare for work, now definitely late for my crucial presentation, the physical symptoms of anxiety overwhelmed me. My chest tightened. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. For the first time in my professional life, I called in sick for an important meeting. I simply couldn't function. The financial violation, combined with my family's instant defense of Brooke, left me reeling. As I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, watching my sister and cousin's Instagram updates, heading through airport security with first class boarding passes, I felt a profound sense of betrayal that transcended the stolen money. This wasn't merely about $15,000. This was about a lifetime of disparate standards and expectations. This was about a family dynamic that had consistently protected Brooke at my expense. This was about the crushing realization that no matter what evidence I presented, my family would always opt to believe Brooke's version of reality over mine. In that moment of stark clarity, Something within me shifted. If my family wouldn't help me seek justice, I would have to pursue it myself. If they wouldn't believe me, I would accumulate evidence so overwhelming that they would have no choice but to confront the truth. With newfound resolve, I picked up my phone and made another call, not to my family, but to the police. The local police precinct was more bustling than I'd anticipated for a weekday morning. I sat on a rigid plastic chair, clutching a folder containing my credit card statements, screenshots of Brooke's Instagram posts, and the note she had left in my apartment. After nearly an hour's wait, I was finally called to speak with Officer Garcia, a middle-aged woman with weary eyes and a pragmatic demeanor. "This happens more frequently than you'd imagine," she noted after I explained the situation. "Family fraud cases are quite common, actually." She meticulously took my statement, posing clarifying questions about the timeline and how Brooke might have accessed my card information. When I mentioned my family was already dismissing my claims without evidence, Officer Garcia nodded knowingly. "Unfortunately, that's also common," she stated. "Families often close ranks, even when the evidence is clear. It's difficult for people to accept that someone they love could commit a crime, especially against another family member." She clarified that because the card remained in my possession and only its information was used, this would be classified as identity theft, not credit card theft. She also cautioned that prosecution would be complicated by our family relationship. "You can absolutely press charges," she assured me, "but be prepared for family pressure to drop them." I witness it in almost every case like this. After filing the police report, I proceeded directly to my bank. The fraud department representative I met in person was considerably less optimistic than Officer Garcia. Since the security verification processes had been correctly followed using my own phone, the bank considered the charges provisionally authorized. They would investigate, but it could take up to 90 days to determine if I qualified for fraud protection. In the interim, I would be responsible for at least the minimum payment on the $15,000 balance, with rent due in 2 weeks and several other bills pending. This unforeseen financial strain would be significant, even with my healthy savings. The realization that Brooke was currently flying first class to Tokyo while I scrambled to manage the financial repercussions of her theft filled me with a cold fury I had never experienced. But beneath the anger was a profound pain, the recognition that my sister held so little regard for me that she could steal such a substantial sum without hesitation or remorse. Throughout the day, proof of Brooke's lavish spending continued to surface on social media. An Instagram story showed her and Olivia clinking champagne glasses in their first-class cabin. Within hours of landing, they were posting photos from the Park Hyatt Tokyo, flaunting the spectacular views from their luxurious room. By evening, images of shopping bags from high-end Japanese brands appeared, precisely matching the charges on my credit card. The most infuriating post came from Olivia. "Best surprise ever from the world's most generous cousin. #blessed #Tokyo shopping spree." The photo depicted Brooke and Olivia surrounded by shopping bags from designer stores, both sporting new designer sunglasses with price tags in Japanese yen, equivalent to hundreds of dollars still visible. I meticulously saved every post, every story, every piece of digital evidence linking them to the fraudulent purchases. I was building a case that no one, not even my enabling parents, could deny. Speaking of my parents, they called that evening, their tone notably different from our morning conversation. They had spoken with Brooke, who had apparently given them an alternative explanation for her sudden trip. "She says she won the tickets in an online contest," my mother said, her voice laced with hope, "and that Olivia's parents gave them spending money as a graduation gift." I couldn't suppress a bitter laugh. "Mom, do you honestly believe that? When has Brooke ever won anything, let alone first-class tickets to Japan worth thousands of dollars?" "It's more believable than her stealing your credit card," my father interjected. "You need to drop this, Hazel. You're going to damage your relationship with your sister over what might be a bank error." "A bank error?" I repeated, incredulous. "Dad, she literally posted photos of herself buying the exact items that were charged to my card. How can you still defend her?" "We're not defending anyone," my mother insisted, though her tone clearly contradicted her words. We're just saying you should wait until Brooke comes home to discuss this calmly, instead of making accusations and involving the police. When I informed them I had already filed a police report, the conversation rapidly deteriorated. My father accused me of attempting to ruin Brooke's life over a misunderstanding. My mother began to cry, declaring she had failed as a parent if her daughters could treat each other this way. Neither seemed concerned that I had been robbed of $15,000, or that their younger daughter was the perpetrator. After ending the call, I received a barrage of text messages from extended family members. Word had spread quickly. Aunt Susan implied I was jealous of Brooke's free spirit and adventure. Uncle Robert questioned whether I might have given permission, while tired and simply forgotten. Cousin Taylor wondered if this was all an overreaction to Brooke borrowing my card for an emergency. Only Uncle William, my father's brother and the family's financial pragmatist, reached out with genuine concern. "Have you spoken with a lawyer?" he texted. "This is serious, and you should protect yourself regardless of family feelings." His message was the only one that acknowledged the reality of what had occurred, and I felt a surge of gratitude amidst my growing isolation. The psychological toll of the situation began to manifest physically. My already problematic insomnia worsened, allowing me only 2 or 3 hours of fragmented sleep each night. I found myself questioning my own worth when my family so easily dismissed my experience. Memories from childhood resurfaced. The time Brooke broke my treasured music box at age 6, and my parents told me to be understanding because she was younger. The Christmas she opened my presents because she couldn't wait for her turn, and was praised for her enthusiasm. The countless times her transgressions were minimized while my achievements were merely expected. My friend Stephanie became my lifeline during this period. She came over most evenings after work, bringing dinner and a compassionate ear. Unlike my family, she never doubted the reality of what had transpired. "Of course, she took your card," Stephanie stated firmly. "The evidence is literally on her Instagram. Your family is in denial because facing the truth would mean acknowledging they failed somewhere along the way." Stephanie's clear-eyed perspective helped me preserve my sanity as the gaslighting from my family intensified. With her encouragement, I continued methodically compiling evidence. I documented the precise timeline of events, secured copies of all transaction records, and gathered screenshots of every social media post connecting Brooke and Olivia to the stolen funds. I also contacted my law school friend Derek, who specialized in financial crimes. He reviewed my evidence and confirmed my suspicion. I had a robust case for criminal charges against my sister. "But are you prepared for what that means for your family?" he asked gently. "Once you go down this road, relationships change permanently. Some never recover." I pondered his question for a long time. Was I ready to potentially fracture my family beyond repair? Was justice for this theft worth the possibility of permanent estrangement from my parents? Did I have it in me to send my own sister to court, or even possibly to jail? The answer crystallized as I watched yet another Instagram story of Brooke and Olivia enjoying an expensive sushi dinner, laughing without a care in the world. What hurt most wasn't the money, significant as it was the complete absence of remorse. The absolute lack of consideration for how her actions affected me. The brazen confidence that, once again, there would be no consequences for her behavior. This wasn't just about the $15,000. This was about finally breaking a lifelong pattern of enablement and denial. This was about definitively establishing that my boundaries mattered, that my financial security was not a resource for Brooke to plunder whenever she desired something she hadn't earned. I spent the week preparing for their return. According to the flight information I had found in my credit card transactions, Brooke and Olivia were due back in Boston the following Sunday. I knew my parents would welcome them home, likely with celebration rather than confrontation. I had no doubt Brooke had concocted an elaborate tale to explain their luxury vacation, a narrative my parents were all too willing to believe. But this time would be different. This time I possessed undeniable evidence. This time I was ready to break the cycle, irrespective of the cost to our family dynamics. As Sunday approached, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. The stage was set for a family reckoning unlike anything we had ever experienced. Sunday dawned with an undeniable undercurrent of tension. I had learned through family text messages, from which I was conspicuously excluded, that my parents were hosting a welcome home dinner for Brooke and Olivia. This exclusion was telling. They knew a confrontation was imminent and sought to control the narrative by keeping me at bay. I dressed meticulously that evening, selecting a professional black dress and minimal jewelry. This was no casual visit. It was a reckoning. I slipped my evidence folder into my leather portfolio and drove the familiar route to my childhood home, my heart thudding with every mile. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed several cars already parked. Family members had gathered, eager to hear about the exciting Tokyo adventure. Perfect. An audience would make it far harder for my parents to dismiss the undeniable evidence I was about to unveil. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, positioning myself as a visitor rather than a family member. My mother answered, her smile faltering when she saw me. "Hazel, we weren't expecting you," she said, her tone clearly indicating this was no oversight. "I wouldn't miss Brooke's homecoming," I replied evenly, stepping past her into the foyer. The dining room buzzed with relatives, Aunt Susan and her husband, Uncle Robert and his wife, my grandparents, and several cousins, including Olivia's parents. At the heart of the attention sat Brooke, animated and radiant, distributing small gifts from Japan. Olivia sat beside her, occasionally interjecting details into Brooke's dramatic recounting of their adventures. A hush fell over the room as I entered. Brooke froze mid-sentence, a Japanese fan clutched in her hand. For a split second, genuine fear flickered across her face before she swiftly composed herself into a bright smile. "Hazel!" she exclaimed with forced enthusiasm. "I didn't know you were coming. Look what I brought you." She reached for a small package on the table, but I remained standing in the doorway, my portfolio held firmly. "How was Tokyo?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. $15,000 worth of luxury must have been quite the experience. The room's atmosphere seemed to drop several degrees. My father rose from his seat at the head of the table. "Hazel, if you've come to cause a scene, perhaps we should speak privately," he suggested, his tone a clear warning. "Actually, Dad, I believe the entire family should hear this," I countered. "Since most of them already know about my ridiculous accusation, they should also hear the evidence." Brooke laughed nervously. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "We won this trip in an online contest. Tell her, Olivia." Olivia nodded too quickly, her eyes darting around the room. "Yeah, Brooke entered this travel contest thing, and they picked her entry. Super lucky." My mother stepped forward, subtly positioning herself between me and Brooke in an instinctively protective gesture. "Let's all calm down," she suggested. "Brooke and Olivia just got back from a long flight. They're tired. This isn't the time for whatever misunderstanding you're still upset about, Hazel." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling theft and fraud now?" Brooke stood up, her expression morphing into one of wounded innocence. Her eyes began to glisten with tears, a talent she had perfected since childhood. "I don't know why you're doing this," she said tremulously. "It really hurts that you'd accuse me of something so awful. I would never steal from you. You're my sister." Several family members murmured sympathetically, casting disapproving glances my way. Aunt Susan put an arm around Brooke supportively. Uncle Robert shook his head as if disappointed in my behavior. My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Hazel. I will not have you coming into our home and attacking your sister with these baseless accusations. If you're having financial problems, we can discuss that privately, but don't blame Brooke for your issues." "Baseless?" I echoed, unable to believe what I was hearing despite having anticipated this exact response. "The police and the bank don't seem to think they're baseless, Dad." Brooke began to cry in earnest, burying her face in our mother's shoulder, the perfect victim. "Stop pretending, Hazel," my father said, his voice hard with finality. "She would never touch your money. This isn't the first time you've made up stories for attention." My mother looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. "Maybe you should talk to someone professional," she suggested quietly. "These delusions aren't healthy." I stood frozen, the full weight of my isolation crashing down on me. Here the first was the victim of a serious crime committed by my own sister, being treated as though I was mentally unstable for articulating the truth. The injustice was breathtaking. In that moment, memories flooded my mind with painful clarity. Brooke breaking my treasured music box at age 6, and my parents telling me to share better. Brooke borrowing my new sweater in high school and returning it stained, with my mother suggesting I shouldn't have clothes too nice to be ruined. Brooke copying my college essay, and my father praising her creativity rather than addressing the plagiarism. A lifetime of being gaslit about my own reality. A lifetime of adjusting my expectations to accommodate Brooke's behavior. A lifetime of being told that my boundaries were the problem, not her violations. Something crystallized within me in that moment, an absolute clarity about the destructive pattern we had been locked in for decades, and my own unwitting role in perpetuating it. By continuing to doubt myself, by seeking validation from people committed to denying reality, I had been complicit in my own diminishment. No more. A strange calm settled over me, replacing the anxiety and anger that had consumed me for the past week. I surveyed the room, taking in the faces of my relatives, their discomfort, their judgment, their unwillingness to consider that the family narrative might be built on falsehoods. None of it could affect me anymore. I smiled. The unexpected expression caught everyone off guard, including Brooke, whose tears momentarily ceased in confusion. "You're right, Dad," I said softly. "Brooke would never touch my money." My father looked relieved at my apparent capitulation, already turning back toward his seat at the table. "Because the card she used," I continued, opening my portfolio and extracting the first document, "wasn't actually my primary Excelsior card." All eyes returned to me, confusion etched on every face. "It was my backup card," I explained, my voice gaining strength. "The one I keep specifically for monitoring potential fraud. The one with special security features I had installed after noticing small, unexplained charges on my account 3 months ago, after Brooke visited for my housewarming party." The silence in the dining room was absolute. Even Brooke had abandoned her performance, her tear-streaked face frozen in growing alarm. I laid out the first document on the dining table, a detailed transaction record from the card company. "This special monitored card sends email notifications with IP addresses for every purchase," I explained, my tone professional as if presenting to clients. "The first-class tickets to Tokyo, purchased at 2:04 a.m. from IP address 172.16.34.91, my apartment building, specifically my Wi-Fi network." I placed a second document beside the first. "Here are the screenshots of the Instagram posts with timestamps matching exactly when the purchases were made. Notice the caption on this one, posted at 6:15 a.m. from the airport. Surprise trip with my favorite cousin. #Tokyo #first class." Brooke began to speak, but I continued, methodically placing a third document on the growing pile. "This is the hotel confirmation email," I said. "Interesting how it was sent to brookewilliams93@gmail.com, isn't it?" And here I added a fourth sheet. "Are the store receipts forwarded from the credit card company, complete with a signature that looks remarkably like yours, Brooke?" The handwriting analyst the police consulted thought so too. My father's face had drained of color. My mother clutched the back of a dining chair for support. Around the table, relatives shifted uncomfortably, the narrative they had accepted beginning to crumble under the weight of the evidence. But I wasn't finished. I had saved the most damning proof for last. From my portfolio, I removed a small flash drive and held it up. After discovering the unauthorized transactions, I contacted my building manager. I said, "Our lobby and hallways have security cameras. Would you like to see the footage from 2 a.m. last Sunday?" Brooke's composure completely collapsed. She looked wildly around the room, like a trapped animal seeking escape. "She said I could use it," she blurted suddenly. "Hazel told me I could use the card as a gift for helping her with a work project." All eyes turned to me, then back to Brooke, whose story was already evolving. "Well, she didn't say it directly," Brooke amended quickly, "but she implied it. She owes me anyway for all the times I helped her." Olivia, who had been silent throughout my presentation, suddenly spoke up, her voice small and frightened. You told me she gave you permission to use it as a birthday gift, she said to Brooke. You said it was already arranged between you two. Brooke shot Olivia a venomous look. Shut up, she hissed. But Olivia, perhaps sensing the direction things were headed, continued. You woke me up at 4 a.m. saying we had to pack for Tokyo. Because your sister had surprised you with tickets. I had no idea they were stolen. The word stolen hung in the air, impossible to ignore or reinterpret. My mother sank into a chair, her hand covering her mouth. My father stood rigid, his worldview visibly crumbling as he processed the evidence before him. You went into her room while she was sleeping? He asked Brooke, his voice hollow with disbelief. Brooke, recognizing that her denials were futile, switched tactics with the adaptability that had served her throughout life. It was just borrowing, she insisted, tears flowing again. I was going to pay it back. Hazel has so much money, she wouldn't even miss $15,000. Those words, the casual entitlement they revealed, seemed to finally pierce my father's protective illusions about his younger daughter. Olivia's parents stood abruptly. We had no idea, her mother said firmly. Olivia will return everything purchased with that money immediately. Aunt Susan removed her arm from around Brooke's shoulders, a physical distancing mirroring her. Shifting allegiance. Around the table, relatives who had been so quick to doubt me now avoided my eyes, shame evident in their postures. The doorbell rang, an unexpected interruption in the tense scene. My father moved automatically to answer it, returning moments later with Officer Garcia, the police officer who had taken my initial report. Miss Williams, she said, addressing me formally. I received your message about having additional evidence to add to your case. The presence of law enforcement made the situation undeniably real. This wasn't a family disagreement to be swept under the rug. This was a crime with legal consequences. Brooke, finally cornered and realizing the gravity of the situation, launched into full panic mode. You can't do this to me, she cried, looking wildly between our parents. Tell her she can't do this. A criminal record will ruin my life. My father, his face aged a decade in the past 10 minutes, slowly shook his head. This is beyond us now, Brooke. These are the consequences of your actions. It was perhaps the first time in her 29 years that our father had acknowledged that. Brooke must face the results of her choices. The shock of it seemed to stun her into momentary silence. My mother, however, made one last desperate attempt to shield her favorite child. Hazel, please, she begged. She's your sister. We can work this out as a family. She can pay you back over time. I regarded my mother steadily. How would she pay me back? She hasn't held a job for more than 6 months in her entire adult life. Every time she faces a financial crisis, you and Dad bail her out. That stops. Now, I turned to Officer Garcia. I'd like to add these documents to my statement, I said, gathering the evidence from the table. And I want to formally press charges for identity theft and credit card fraud. Brooke lunged toward me, her face contorted with rage and fear. But my father caught her arm, restraining her gently but firmly. Don't make this worse, he said. Quietly. Officer Garcia took my sister aside, speaking to her in low, serious tones about the process ahead, while my mother wept silently at the table. The family dinner had transformed into a crime scene. The welcome home celebration into the beginning of legal proceedings that would change all our lives. As Officer Garcia finished taking Brooke's statement, my sister fixed me with a look of pure hatred. I hope you're happy now, she spat. Ruining my life over money. Is that all I am to you? A dollar amount. I met her gaze calmly. This isn't about money, Brooke. This is about consequences. You've never had them, and it's damaged you. Maybe this will finally help you grow up. In the days that followed, my parents frantically tried to contain the damage. They offered to immediately pay the entire amount if I would drop the charges. They enlisted family friends who were lawyers to discuss alternatives to prosecution. They appealed to my sense of familial duty, to my compassion, to my concern for Brooke's future, but I remained resolute. This was a felony theft. The amount was substantial. The breach of trust was profound. And most crucially, this destructive pattern needed to be broken for everyone's sake, including Brooks. Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, seemed to concur when the case finally reached her courtroom. She ordered full restitution of the $15,000, 2 years of probation, and 200 hours of community service for Brooke. The felony charge would remain on her record, a permanent reminder of the night she crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. As we exited the courthouse, my father placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of support that arrived far too late, yet one I accepted. Nonetheless, I think we failed you both, he said quietly, in very different ways. It was the closest he would come to an apology, but it was a start. The 6 months following Brooks' conviction marked a period of profound change for our entire family. The immediate aftermath was painful and chaotic, with my parents still desperately attempting to shield Brooke from the full impact of her actions. They offered to cover her restitution, which I refused. They tried to find loopholes in her probation requirements, which I opposed. They even suggested family therapy where I could work through my anger, as if my emotions were the problem, rather than Brooks' behavior. For the first time in my life, I established firm boundaries. I would not attend family gatherings where Brooks' actions were excused or minimized. I would not participate in conversations that gaslit my experience. I would not pretend that what happened was a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. These boundaries met with initial resistance. My mother accused me of being unforgiving. My father suggested I was punishing the entire family for Brooks' error. Extended relatives implored me to move on for family peace. But I held firm. And slowly, a new family dynamic began to emerge from the ashes of the old. With the case concluded and her legal obligations unambiguous, Brooke faced genuine consequences, perhaps for the very first time. The job opportunity she had been pursuing evaporated when her background check revealed the fresh felony conviction. Our parents, finally recognizing the damage their enabling had caused, established their own boundaries. Brooke would now need to find employment and support herself. They would not provide financial assistance beyond helping with her initial restitution payment, which she would then repay them over time. For someone who had always been rescued, these new expectations were a harsh awakening. Brooke cycled through her familiar patterns, denial, blame, self-pity, but found they no longer yielded results. Reality had finally caught up with her. Olivia, perhaps the least culpable individual in the drama, made sincere efforts to make amends. She returned all items purchased with my stolen card and penned a heartfelt letter of apology. I didn't know it was stolen money, but I should have questioned where it all came from, she wrote. I'm sorry I was a part of hurting you. I'm trying to be more thoughtful about the choices I make and the people I trust. I accepted her apology and even met her for coffee occasionally. Her remorse seemed genuine, and I saw no reason to permanently penalize her for Brooks' manipulation. My own healing process was complex and non-linear. I began therapy to address not just the theft itself, but the lifetime of family dynamics that had contributed to it. Through weekly sessions with Dr. Marshall, I started to comprehend how I had internalized the belief that my needs and boundaries were secondary to Brooks' feelings. I learned to recognize the subtle ways I had been conditioned to doubt my own perceptions when they clashed with the prevailing family narrative. The support group for victims of family financial abuse that Dr. Marshall recommended proved particularly helpful. Hearing other stories of betrayal by those who should have protected them made me feel less isolated. More importantly, witnessing those further along in their healing journey gave me hope that I could reconstruct my sense of security and trust. My friendship with Stephanie deepened significantly during this period. She had stood by me when others doubted, offering practical assistance and unwavering emotional support. We began a tradition of Sunday brunches, creating a new ritual to replace the strained family dinners that had once occupied that time slot. Your boundaries aren't just for you, she told me during one of these brunches. They're actually a gift to Brooke, too, even if she can't see it yet. Real love sometimes means letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. Professionally, I channeled my experience into a new focus. After securing a full refund from my credit card company, I developed a financial literacy presentation for my firm's community outreach program, with a special emphasis on protecting oneself from identity theft, particularly from family members. A surprisingly prevalent problem. 6 months after the court case, our family gathered for Thanksgiving. The invitation had come directly from my father, with an unusual addendum. Brooke has something she wants to say to everyone and especially to you. I arrived at my parents' house with cautious optimism. The atmosphere was distinctly different from past family gatherings. There was a tentative quality to the conversation, as if everyone was carefully navigating this new reality where uncomfortable truths were acknowledged rather than suppressed. Brooke looked different too. Her flashy clothes and perfectly styled hair had been replaced by a simpler, more practical appearance. She had found work as an administrative assistant at a small accounting firm, a position well below her capabilities, but one of the few options available with her record. The humbling experience seemed to have initiated genuine change. After dinner, she asked for everyone's attention, her hands visibly trembling as she spoke. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began. "But mostly, I want to apologize to all of you for the embarrassment and pain I caused our family, and especially to Hazel." She turned to face me directly, her eyes meeting mine without the manipulation or self-pity that had been her trademark. "What I did was inexcusable," she said. "I stole from you. I violated your trust. I prioritized my desires over your basic right to security. And when confronted, I lied and tried to make you seem crazy for telling the truth. I'm deeply ashamed, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm working to become someone who would never do those things again." The sincerity in her voice was something I had rarely heard from my sister. This wasn't the performance of remorse she had perfected over years of minor transgressions. This was genuine accountability. I won't say that moment instantly healed our relationship. Trust, once shattered, rebuilds slowly, if at all. But it was a beginning, a small stone in the foundation of whatever new relationship might be possible between us. Our parents, too, were learning and growing. My mother had started attending Al-Anon meetings, recognizing that her enabling behavior mirrored patterns in families dealing with addiction. My father had become more reflective, occasionally acknowledging the ways his parenting had contributed to our difficult dynamics. The holiday wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old habits that threatened to reassert themselves. But beneath the awkwardness was something new, honesty. We were finally seeing each other clearly, without the distorting lens of denial and favoritism that had defined our family for decades. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the strange journey that had begun with the theft of $15,000. The financial loss had been significant, but the transformation it catalyzed was worth far more. I had found my voice, established my boundaries, and learned that I could survive the disapproval of those whose love had always seemed conditional. Sometimes the most valuable things we gain come from the losses we never wanted to experience. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to say, "This is my reality, this is my truth, this is my worth, and I will not allow anyone to tell me otherwise." Have you ever had to stand up to family when no one else would? Believe you? Thank you for listening to my story. Take care. Good luck.